Welcome to episode 65 of the Half Point Per Podcast. I am your host, Evan Riggs, joined as always by my co-host, Dalton Willie, and first-time internet haver, Johnny Pham. Johnny, how's it going in the brand new digs?
It's good. First time having Wi-Fi. It's pretty
20 days
surreal.
without Wi-Fi, I think, was our count.
20 days. It was a long 20 days. Got everything unpacked in the house. Still couldn't figure out like what to put on the walls yet. We have one section at the corner done, but
I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. I've been in my place since early August, and I have a poster like right over here still on the ground. Like, don't know what to do with it. So
if you look on the daybed, there's a hammer there to kind of tell me I need to put nails in the wall. But
I see there's a rock back there too, which is a little bit interesting.
Yeah, it's a KU Jayhawk little welcome sign that I got from some friends, from a potential co-host of the show.
Oh, interesting.
Potential co-hosts.
Unfortunately, we should have talked with Johnny's parents before buying said gift. Not too many people have used this for two welcome rocks, but I guess Johnny can make it work.
Yeah, but you guys don't know which one's yours, so this could be my parents, and that you guys are outside, and then it's kind of vice versa. So,
way to make us feel really special.
You're
highly doubtful. But with Johnny not having internet 2 weeks ago and never getting his picks in, he is DQ'd from said standings I'm about ready to read off, or at least like a not finished or like a little asterisk or something next to his name. But I'll give Johnny. Johnny was 9-3 and 8-4. That's 9-3 straight up, 8-4 against the spread.
I'll take it.
I was 9-4 straight up, 7-6 against the spread. Man, I feel like Vegas really brought it home in the Super Bowl with the Bengals not winning, but still covering, which was a split for both Dalton and I. Dalton 10-3, 9-4. So Dalton is the postseason picks champion. But what was the final score of the game? 24-21. Is that right?
Yes.
Or was it 24-20? 24-20, whatever. I guess 27-20, and you guessed 24-13. So, like, one of your scores was dead on, and the other one of mine was very close. And my score was actually pretty close. And at plus 8,000, I was kind of raising the eyebrow a little bit there.
It was 23-20.
Because if it wasn't for a horrible missed OPI on T. Higgins to start the third quarter, the Bengals lose 23-13, and I look really smart because I'm one off. So I was definitely in the range.
Something else happened that
the phantom hold on Cooper Kupp on the touchdown on that drive. If you remember, they were in the red zone and they called a offensive holding that gave the Rams a whole nother 4 offensive possessions.
Well, but so 27-20 is my guess. I needed 23-20. I feel like there was something that happened where the Rams like should have scored a touchdown, but didn't. Maybe it was just Stafford saying screw it and throwing the 50-yard pick that I'm thinking of. Not totally sure, but I feel like 27-20 was well within my grasp too. But Cooper Kupp was my MVP pick, so I nailed that one. Aaron Donald at plus 1,500, who some would say should have been the MVP. Also a good pick by Dalton. And our plus 230 any position bet was a freebie. It feels like too.
Yes, the other part I just want to be frustrated about. No, not the Gatorade. Actually, is the fact that MVP voting ended at the 2-minute warning. And arguably the most important play of the game made by Aaron Donald to end the game in sacking Joe Burrow or almost sacking him didn't get included in the MVP.
Has there ever been co-MVP? There have been co-MVPs of the Super Bowl before, right?
I believe. I don't actually know
if there was ever a year for co-MVP, I think this actually may have been the year because the Rams went all game, basically, or all second half once Odell went out without doing pretty much anything. And everyone and their mom knew, like, hey, they need to get Cooper Kupp the ball. They're not getting Cooper Kupp the ball. When they finally did get Cooper Kupp the ball, they went right down, scored a touchdown. It was like, Stafford made, number one, the great no-look pass. Great no-look pass. Don't get me wrong. But, like, that just felt like that's an MVP drive by Kupp. And then, obviously, Donald, after the Bengals made just the oh-so-terrible mistake of firing him up. I think that was late first half, early second half, getting in his face when it wasn't even a late hit on Burrow either. Burrow was actually still in bounds when he shoved him, but got in his face. Donald pretty much wrecked the entire game after that.
The only time there have been co-MVPs was Super Bowl 12.
Wow. Okay. So I was thinking that, like, weirdly, the Patriots had co-MVPs, like one of those, like, non-Tom Brady years. So I definitely didn't have Super Bowl 12 in the old database when I was thinking of that.
In the same number of pass attempts, Aaron Donald had the same number of pressures as the entire Bengals team. So I'm just saying, guy definitely was up there and deserving it. I'm not trying to take anything away from Cooper Kupp, but
the game would have ended on a sack, if not for Burrow just heaving the ball to the ground, basically. What probably won Cooper Kupp the MVP was he had the best run of the night for the Rams, like 7 yards.
I was going to say, Cooper Kupp probably would have been more deserving of MVP if Sean McVay wasn't calling plays and they just stopped running it. It's funny that carries for 28 yards.
It's funny that Kupp wins the MVP, has 2 touchdowns, and was still under his yardage prop by like 10 yards, like 8 yards, something like that. Still didn't hit his over because it got clear up to like 108 by the time not foolishly. Sean McVay, you're the fool. I smartly bet the line, and Sean McVay kept me from it.
That's and I will say, I think we were pretty right that the Super Bowl was going to be not memorable. I don't really think it was the greatest.
It was a good finish, but overall, like, the third quarter was kind of drunk for like 5 minutes, and then it was just like defensive stop, 2 sacks, incompletion, 1 yard run. Like, it was a lot of nothing for a while.
Yeah, until the drive to score the touchdown to go ahead, the Rams had 8 straight possessions that were 3 and outs. It was not a good Super Bowl to watch. The play calling was really questionable. I think both these coaches are not offensive geniuses like they've been brought out to be.
I still think you could probably say McVay is, but McVay, like Andy Reid, like a lot of great coaches, is stubborn, and that's fair. And that's probably what was happening there.
Yeah. So just all around frustrating Super Bowl to watch for a lot of it, in my opinion. You think Zach Taylor is going to let Joe Mixon play more third downs next year? We will talk about
that or at least the really important ones.
Well, Samaje Perine is actually an amazing third down back. He didn't convert either of the 3rd and 1s, but it's clearly not his fault. It's clearly just the offensive line. And he's probably, I think he's a top 30 pick next year, Samaje Perine.
If the Bengals win that game, Mixon and Higgins are probably the top 2 for MVP. Of course, on the other side, it was rough for Cam Akers. And if you're looking ahead to next year for Cam Akers, you're trying to erase that one from your memory. But Dalton, we are actually here to look ahead to next year. We've got, as the title indicates, a way too early top 12 coming at you for 2022. How this will work is we'll start at 12. We'll go down to 1. Hopefully that's okay with you, Dalton. I know that caused some heartburn before the show when I gave you that little tidbit, but
I'm just worried that one of these players is going to be earlier on the list than you expected, and I'm going to get yelled at.
So we're on 12 to 1, and then we'll reconvene and talk about any guys that have been left off. I know we have one guy. Well, I have one guy that's left off. Apparently it was a late ad for you that I think would be on a lot of top 12s. But Dalton, do you want to kick us off, or do you want me to start with my number 12?
I'll start it off because I think we called our shot on this guy last offseason, and it's really coming around if you listen to the podcast that this is going to be his breakout year.
Trey Sermon.
Let me tell you about this top 12. I got hammered last night and wrote it up, and Jeff Janis is number 1. We'll skip to the end. No, unfortunately not. It is the other running back in that class who forced the most missed tackles, though. It is Javonte Williams.
Yep, he's my 12 as well.
There we go. So my fun stat for him, he had 8 fewer missed tackles than Jonathan Taylor on 100 fewer carries. And he had the 15th most carries in the NFL, but still finished with 901 yards and second in broken tackles. Guy's absolutely phenomenal. I think one of the best predictors for success in the NFL is broken tackles and how you force them. He's great at it. Melvin Gordon should be gone. I don't really think it matters who's quarterback.
Should be. Honestly, like, that's not 100% a given in my mind, but this rank is me assuming and more so hoping that that's the case.
Yeah. And if he's gone, I mean, Javonte Williams is poised to take over. He had some dazzling runs last season where he was 3-4 yards behind the line of scrimmage and fought for 2 yards when he just absolutely amazing talent. I think next year he'll probably be a top 5 pick.
And we saw in the Chiefs game too, when it was just him. There was no Melvin Gordon in Kansas City, and like he was awesome in that game. And it's not that even that Melvin Gordon like should have been playing. Gordon was great last year actually too, but Javonte, he's obviously still an ascending player because he's just going into his second year. So yeah.
I mean, I don't really have a bad thing to say about him. I had to fight myself not to rank him higher here, and it's only because I don't know the backfield, how it's going to play out, and there's just a few question marks. But talent-wise, he's probably going to be one of the best backs in the NFL next year.
It's funny you say that because I was surprised that he was only RB10 on Fantasy Pros like ECR ranks right now, and I am assuming like they're gonna have some, whether it's just Mike Boone, whether he's their second fiddle, or whether it's a cheap guy they bring in, they're gonna have someone else who gets carries. So it won't be only him. I don't think he's gonna have like the Joe Mixon, like Dalvin Cook, like Derrick Henry type of workload. But if he's clearly the main guy, I worry that his ranking is going to get a little bit too high for my liking. So I actually was like a little bit more cautious in the way that I wanted to talk about him. But he finishes the RB17 last year, and that's like a true 50-50 split with Melvin Gordon in the games that they both played, which was, I think, Gordon only missed the one game, if I remember right. He was 15th in carries, which is right behind Eckler. So, like, he was still getting, obviously, a nice volume, but it wasn't like he was getting a ton of volume by any means. If Gordon is gone, like, he's going to get more carries, but just not quite those top guys, I don't think. But here's where he can absolutely grow. Melvin Gordon had 20 attempts inside the 10 last year, 4 touchdowns in those 20 attempts. And then he had, I think that's like 11th in the league. Inside the 5, he had 11 carries, Melvin Gordon. And Javonte was also 20 attempts inside the 10 and 4 touchdowns, and then 10 attempts inside the 5. So, like, as long as Gordon's not back, I think Javonte is like the clear top guy as far as just carries, at least for sure, in the red zone. So I think he's got room to grow just in that inside the 10 role. And this obviously for both of us, volume definitely helps, but it's not just a volume argument. Like the guy is very, very good. You mentioned the missed tackles, and that was his thing in college too. Like this guy has by far the most missed tackles forced of anybody. I know we both like Trey Sermon, and that is still a little TBD from last year's draft, but I think we both like Javonte more than Najee Harris, and I feel pretty validated in that take, at least right now. I know Najee had the better counting stats last year, but when you just, I think if you ask
400 total,
I think if you ask most just football analysts who the better running back is, I think they would say Javonte. I think.
And I think if they don't say Javonte, this will be a season that they can eat their words. If Denver, I don't think this is going to happen, and I don't want to speculate on this. If Denver lands Aaron Rodgers or another big quarterback name, Javonte Williams really has, I think his ADP could really get out of control, and he can start going in the top 3 of players, especially, I think this year, unlike last year, and maybe we'll talk about this more, there's a lot of really shaky running back picks that you don't feel as confident about as you would like to in this top 12.
And the last thing I want to say on Javonte before we move on is, like, I think he's awesome. I just don't quite think he's Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, like Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry. Like, I don't think he's like that tier of guy just as far as the pure prospect. So even if they got that quarterback, whether it's Rodgers, Russell Wilson, somebody we don't know about, like even if it was like Kirk Cousins, who clearly elevates their offense over what it was last year, I don't think I would ever feel comfortable with top 3. But I'm definitely I'm totally good with him at 12, and he has upward mobility more so than downward. Because even if Gordon is back, like he's not going to be 12, but he's not going to drop too far.
Yeah, and I just like him better than I like some of the other guys in this range. Like DeAndre Swift is a very good running back.
I think Swift is actually better than Javonte
Me
Williams.
too, but his situation
Yes.
is just not great. Saquon's the guy going around him. Don't like anything going on there. Nick Chubb.
I do like all their coaching hires.
Me too. Nick Chubb, love the player. Hate the fact that I have to watch Kareem Hunt share everything with him. I mean, Aaron Jones, big question marks there. I just don't think any of those guys. Aaron Jones is probably still a better back than him in the NFL, but situationally, I have questions about how successful that offense is going to be post Rodgers.
And we'll see if it's post Rodgers too.
Yes, if it is post Rodgers, or if he's just doing another cleanse.
Who's your 11?
Okay, so there is going to be a notable guy left off here. I'm just going to say it now. It's Alvin Kamara because of his legal situation. I just
wow.
But that's just because it's just like
it's gonna take a minute to get the Kamara on my list.
Well, Kamara, I could tell you he'd be 3 on my list if I had the choice. And this guy would be moved off instead of Javonte, but it's Najee Harris is my 11, and I wouldn't rank Najee in the top 12 if I had Kamara on this list. I know that's weird that Javonte is not 11 and Najee is. This is just kind of like a little bit of respect for him because he's going to get 300 touches. But for as bad as the Steelers' offense was last season, can it get worse? And the answer to that is yes, which is very scary.
You see the Mason Rudolph stuff floating in the ether, just like I do these last week or so.
And it seems like it's Mason Rudolph or Malik Willis seems to be the two popular options for the Steelers right now.
Or Sam Howell. I feel like Sam Howell is a guy that we've seen too.
But we saw all this year that very talented quarterback prospects don't really come out and wow the masses. And we've seen Mason Rudolph, who his record as a starter, I think, is like 5-4-1. But that was also when the Steelers had a legitimate defense.
And they still do, but
and they still do. But that was not because Mason Rudolph was putting up awe-inspiring QB performances. There's a reason he's still a backup. And then
the thing he's done to help his team most is get Myles Garrett thrown out of a game, so they don't have to deal with him for however much time was left in that game.
And Najee Harris was outscored by Austin Eckler and Jonathan Taylor. Eckler missed a game and still outscored him, and Najee Harris had 52 more touches than Austin Eckler. The touchdown equity in Pittsburgh is very bad right now. I don't see a lot.
Well, and we remember the game I think I wrote about in the newsletter where Najee had 19 targets. And and that wasn't Najee. That was just Big Ben is broken.
Yeah. So I want to make it clear, Najee will probably fall out of my rankings if AK is here. If AK does face like a prolonged suspension or worse, Najee will stay. But out of every single pick, except for one other player, Najee Harris would be the one I would be the most upset about walking away from the first round with, just to be clear.
So my number 11, and I'm assuming this guy is in your top 12, probably higher. I just didn't know what to do with him. So this is kind of just a hat tip, just like a hat tip to this guy. That's Derrick Henry at 11. He's the RB14 in just 8 games last year, averaged 23 points a game, which is just, I mean, that's
he outscored Javonte Williams in 8 games.
Yeah, in 8 games. And Javonte didn't miss a game last year. Now, I bet if you looked at touches, it's actually probably not too dissimilar in the volume those two guys had last year. Weeks 1 through 8, he was the RB1 by 42 points. And Taylor picked it up down the stretch, but also Henry was just insane compared to the rest of the league the first half of the season. We've talked about it ad nauseum. The injury stuff does worry me. The workload worries me. But at this point, I'm just going to have to keep ranking him relatively high until either the wheels literally fall off or I see him stop producing. And he obviously had the injury last season, so maybe like that's the start of something, but he came back and like still played okay in their playoff game when he was probably really out of shape and just not really ready for 25 carries like he got. So I have Henry 11. Just I don't know what else to do with him, so I just feel like I have to put him in the top 12.
Yeah, and I have him 2 spots or 1 spot higher at 9. And my concerns are the same. It's just very hard I don't want to evaluate him off one game, but D'Onta Foreman had more yards on 4 carries. Granted, Foreman had a big hole and hit a long run, but Henry had 60-odd yards in a playoff game against the 15th ranked rush defense in the NFL.
Yeah, but he a couple years ago against the Chiefs, he had like 60 something yards on like 20, 24, 20 carries or whatever. So like Henry, even when he's rolling, will have games like that where he just, because that's always been my issue with Henry as a player. It's like if he doesn't get ahead of steam, he's not going to create. He's not like Javonte where he's going to create 5-6 yards out of nothing. Because if you can actually get to him before he gets going, he's not that hard to tackle. Shout out Frank Clark. But if you do let him get going, then good night.
Well, and my concern, I don't think anybody's ranking A.J. Brown in the top 12 this year either. No. And my concern is that the wheels, I just really think the wheels are going to fall off with the Titans. They had the 32nd or the 31st, sorry, the Dolphins were worse. The 31st ranked offensive line in the NFL.
Yeah, the Dolphins offensive line is just like on any graph, it's like a little skull emoji because it was so bad.
It's just parallel with the x-axis these days. But it's such a funnel offense between Henry and A.J. Brown because Julio, I don't think Julio is ever going to be his former self or play a full slate, that there is a huge concern with him getting shut down. And the moment Henry loses a step, or they don't give him 26 touches a game, then, I mean, it's just over for his fantasy production. We know he doesn't catch balls, and we know that even with Arthur Smith gone, Hilliard and other backs were getting those reception opportunities. And Tannehill looked less than inspiring this season, and if it gets worse for him, I mean, that offense really loses everything it needs. Mm-hmm. So I have him at 9, and just like you, it's just a tip of my hat. Like, the guy is an animal, probably one of the best running backs we've seen in the NFL. But it just, things come due, and that guy has a lot of miles on him.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. At number 10 for me, and I guess first, I do want to say, if you're trying to like keep track of these guys, we'll put them in the show notes of this podcast, so don't worry about having to keep track. We'll read them off at the end, but we'll put them in the show notes too. I'll add them to the video description on YouTube after we wrap up the live show here. But at 10 for me, and this is another one where this is kind of a placeholder for right now. I think it's Davante Adams at number 10. I don't know where he's going to go. Is he back in Green Bay with Rodgers? Is he somewhere else with a good quarterback? Like, he's got mobility either way, obviously. Like, if he goes somewhere great, I'm moving him up a little bit probably. Or if he's back with Green Bay, I'm moving him up too. And if he ends up in not a great situation, then I'm moving him down. But I just don't think with the amount of money it's going to cost to get him, I don't understand why. I mean, I don't understand why the Giants paid Kenny Galladay, I guess, but I don't see too many terrible quarterback teams deciding, hey, let's go pay this receiver $80 million, $90 million when we have a terrible quarterback and aren't going to be able to maximize them. That's my hope, at least. But he's just as good and as consistent as it gets at wide receiver in fantasy football for the last 3-4 years. And kind of like Derrick Henry, it's a little bit of a tip of the cap to Adams, but also just a placeholder, because I think unless he goes somewhere truly bad, he's probably still got to be in the top 12 overall.
Yeah, so, I mean, we're probably just going to have to jump around here because I think our rankings are different a bit. But I have him as wide receiver 1 and 4th overall.
Wow.
And it's really just a nod to the fact that he is the best wide receiver in the NFL. When I initially ranked this, what I was reading gave me a lot of he's going back to Green Bay vibes. And today I looked at Green Bay's cap situation.
I'm not trying to figure out what kind of vibes are happening around Green Bay or Aaron Rodgers right now.
Me neither. But the thing was, when I thought he was going to Green Bay, I was like, well, that's probably enough for me to keep him up here, because at wide receiver 1, if Rodgers and him come back, it's an immediate home run hit. With Green Bay having $62 million they need to make up in cap space to franchise tag Davante Adams.
I think that's actually gone down since the last time you saw it, because I think they restructured one of their, I think Kenny Clark, I think they restructured him. So I think they saved some money there. So they're going to obviously do a lot of that stuff, and we'll see what the actual number ends up being. But the point
lot
stands,
of money
yes.
They have to take care of. But I just, wherever he ends up, he's immediately the wide receiver 1 in-house. I know the Raiders and him and Derek Carr have had stuff. Even if he were to end up there, I'd probably still keep him at wide receiver 1. There are situations where
you'd have a Derek Carr wide receiver is the number one receiver in fantasy football.
You know what? He likes to feed Darren Waller, and I think Adams is better than Waller. Give me those 15 targets a game. But at the end of the day, this is a nod. It's off season. He gets my respect. He's the best in the league. And I think that more often than not, where he ends up probably won't hurt his situation that much. So I'm just giving him the number one. He's my fourth guy.
That's actually, that's one spot higher than I have any wide receiver.
Wow.
And I also have multiple receivers, obviously. He is my wide receiver 4 in my ranks. Okay, so, who's your 10?
My 10 is Ja'Marr Chase.
Okay, so, he's my 9, so we can go talk about him here.
Okay, good. So with Ja'Marr, he had a stellar season. Obviously, the best rookie campaign after Justin Jefferson. And I think there are people ranking him all the way up to wide receiver 2 when I was looking at pre-draft rankings, and I just don't know if that's there yet. Part of my issue is I don't know how much I really think the Bengals are going to be this offensive juggernaut to justify 3 guys in the top 15 right now.
Well, they weren't really an offensive juggernaut last year, but yet those guys still, like, if T. Higgins doesn't get hurt for multiple weeks, like, his season end finish would have been perfectly fine, like with where you're going to have to draft him this year, probably. And Higgins, I don't have the number in front of me, but I was looking at it the other day. I think like the last half of the season after he came back, I think it was like Chase was wide receiver 6, Higgins was wide receiver 7. Like they were both like top 8 receivers, and then Mixon's obviously top 5 running back at almost any point of the season you look. So they did it last year, even without being an offensive juggernaut. Those guys all had like different blow-up games that kind of helped them accomplish that.
Yeah, my worry, and this is probably something I'll get into more in the offseason, I trust T. Higgins to produce more than I trust Ja'Marr Chase. Chase
maybe more consistently. I trust Chase more overall to be better.
Yes, but Chase also had 80 of his points in 2 games, which you don't punish a guy for scoring a ton of points like that.
I don't. If I'm the Chase owner, I am perfectly fine with 80 points in 2 weeks.
But that's why he's down here at 10 for me. Is I feel like the guys above him can produce a little more consistently. And my other concern is he got a lot of single coverage last season. I think it was like 58% of his snaps were single coverage. I don't think he gets that anymore. And that just changes the game a little bit. Like a guy we'll talk about later, Tyreek Hill, got a lot of bracket coverage this year to change the way he played the game, and he still was an amazing fantasy asset. And if Ja'Marr Chase, doesn't only get these broken bombs or absolutely wall up a secondary that has Daniel Sorensen covering him and does a 3rd and 27 blitz or wall up the Baltimore Ravens when they're already up 2 scores, then, he's going to get a little more higher in my rankings. But I think this is a good spot for him. He's the wide receiver 4 for me, and I think or 5 for me, and I think that's a fair assessment.
He's 3 for me, and if I'm picking nits, the downside for him is that T. Higgins being a little healthier obviously exists, and if he is like Higgins plus Mixon, it helps him be more efficient, but also like just takes away a little bit from Chase perhaps. But you do have the other side, which is if the offensive line is any better this year, like you would think theoretically more deep passes could be executed between he and Joe Burrow. I can tell you that they would probably have a Super Bowl title, and Chase have about 50 more yards in the Super Bowl MVP perhaps if the offensive line was just a little bit better on one play in that game.
Is that you saying they should have drafted Penei Sewell?
No, it's not. It is not. Okay, number 8. I think we're both at 8, right? Or was Chase?
Yeah, because 9 was Derrick Henry for me.
Okay, so my number 8 is Nick Chubb. And this is another one with a ton of volatility. Who's their quarterback next season? Is it Baker Mayfield again? Is Derek Carr heading to Cleveland? Which, by the way, Derek Carr could be going to Pittsburgh too. That's another one that makes sense to me. Or do they actually go out and get a big fish? Or are they like starting a rookie? Or are they starting Baker with the intent to work in a rookie either later this year or next year? Like they just have so many different paths they can go at quarterback. And also it's Kareem Hunt on the team. I don't think it's like 100% a given that Hunt is on the team. if he is on the team, he counts at $6.2 million against the cap. He has no dead cap hit if he's cut outright. So like they could actually cut or trade Kareem Hunt. I mean, they traded you assume they would trade Odell, but they didn't. They cut him. So never assume, I guess. But his contract doesn't make it a done deal that he's on the Browns next season, but he probably will be. They have one more year of Chubb at a $5 million cap hit before he goes up to like 14 and 16 the next two. And so like that, along with Hunt's contract, kind of sets it up to where they're paying the same amount for their running backs this year and next year, but next year it's just Chubb, no Hunt, and this year it's both those guys. So either one would make sense to me. And I mentioned this in our group chat earlier today. A funny thing about Chubb's contract, if you look at him compared to like Zeke, is there's no dead cap to the Browns if he's cut in 2023 or 2024, compared to Zeke, who is 30, 11, and $6 million in dead cap the next 3 years. Got a 6-year, $90 million deal compared to 3 for 36 for Nick Chubb, which is interesting. But like to me, if Kareem Hunt were somehow not there, Chubb is like a top 3 running back. Since I still think Hunt is probably there, he's down like in the bottom half of the top 12. And then he has the volatility of who's their quarterback next season. If it's Baker, I think this rank is probably about right, or someone like of that caliber. If they somehow got Russell Wilson or somebody pretty good, then he'd move up even a little bit more too.
That's spicy. I don't have Nick Chubb in my top 12.
Now I think that is spicy.
I mean, his underdog ADP is RB11 right now. Has him going overall as a 23rd player.
Well, it was the RB11 in 14 games last year.
I know, but the same concerns exist for me. Last season, I think, and I don't have all the stats from you. I honestly do not expect to have a Nick Chubb conversation here. I love the player. Very frustrating usage of the player, which just leads to like these spiked outcomes. I'm just looking at his snap percent now until post bye, and I'm not sure if Kareem Hunt was healthy these games. I don't think he was. He didn't get a single game over a 60% snap share. He did get 22 carries over 20 carries in 4 of the games. So he definitely was still getting the work, but it's just, I don't like taking players who need to have a hyper efficient edge. And he's definitely a player who can do it.
Yeah. See the difference between Chubb and like a guy in the second or third round that we talk about in the same way is Chubb is like one of the best 3 running backs in the NFL. So I just give him the benefit of the doubt that he's going to outproduce what his volume would indicate that he should.
Absolutely, but it's just way harder to come by. I'm assuming you don't have Najee Harris in the top 12.
No, I don't have Najee Harris in the top 12.
So I am no Najee Harris fan, but I think I have to put Najee Harris above Chubb in my rankings after I did not expect to have this argument here, just a heads up. In my rankings, I think Najee Harris could get like 100 more touches than Nick Chubb. I mean, there's an outcome where that's highly probable.
He could, and he averaged he probably got that last year. He only averaged 1 more point per game. I'm looking at right now, 0.8 points more per game than Nick Chubb. And even in the 14 games Chubb was healthy, I don't think anyone would say last year was like a great year for Chubb. He was good, but he wasn't let me look at 2020, and because his usage wasn't really any different last year to this year. He averaged 16.6 points per game in 12 games. He was the RB9 in 12 games with the same usage the year before. So, I just think Chubb is super good. I'm counting on a little bit of a bounce back season for him, even though he was already really good last year.
Yeah, but even RB9 2 years ago, I mean, he had a good year then.
That's in 12 games. Games.
Oh, I did not know that.
He sprained his MCL and missed a month last year and was still a top 10 running back.
So you have him as your RB4, 5?
Well, I think I have fewer receivers than you. Let me look. He 1 running back, 2, 3. He's my RB5 right now.
Yeah, that is wild. I
really don't think it is. I really don't think it's wild.
I will say, out of everything I've looked, I did not see him that high at all. Anyway.
But like I said, I think there's a ton of volatility here. Who's their quarterback next season? Is Kareem Hunt actually on the team? I think I partially put him here because I think it'd be a bad look for my rankings if on June 1, not a bad look, but like I'd feel dumb like if Hunt weren't on the team or if they upgrade at quarterback. It's like, yeah, I should have just had Chubb a little in my ranks just because I should have been hedging for that possibility. And that's kind of what I'm doing. Now, even if it is Baker at quarterback, I still think Chubb is like my number 10 or 11 overall player.
I mean, I just don't think he's worthy of a top 12 pick. There just needs to be you're just really running a razor thin margin and hoping that he continues that.
That's fine. Chubb has been running that razor thin margin just fine. Even I'd have to actually look at points per game from this last year. Let's see. I don't know. Wait.
He was 10th.
Yeah.
But so if you take out CMC, I guess he was 9th.
Yeah, you should take out CMC. So I don't know. I just think he's super good, and even with less than ideal usage, like it's Nick Chubb. How many touchdowns did he have last year? Doesn't feel like very many.
He had 9.
Like Nick Chubb could easily have that same usage, but have 15 touchdowns in a given season. Not that that's what I'm projecting, but like 9 feels a little bit low for Nick Chubb.
I don't know. That's something we'll have to jump into this offseason. And I'm going to have to look at Nick Chubb a little closer because right now I don't like that ranking. He'd probably be like the 16th pick for me if I was just doing this off the top of my head, to be honest.
Well, I can tell you that there's one guy that I know you're going to name that's not even in my top 12 either. So we just have some differing.
Yeah, and it's a wide receiver, and I'm really curious which one it is.
Differing opinions coming up here. So that was my 8. Have you given your 8 yet?
No.
Okay, give your 8.
I mean, and I think it's a player on this team, and they're 8 and 7. So number 8 for me is Justin Jefferson.
Okay, I have Jefferson higher than that.
Okay, but you have him ranked.
I have him at 6.
Okay, I was about ready.
I really wanted to put him. I really wanted to make Jefferson my number 1 receiver. I think he's actually the best receiver in the NFL.
So that's a strong point, and I will say 1 through 4 for me are pretty interchangeable when it comes to receiver. There is a guy on here, and I think maybe it's who you left off that I just don't really want to rank this high, but I had to. But Justin Jefferson, at first in the offseason, I thought there was potential Kirk Cousins leaves. I don't think that's happening at all. And It looks like the coaching staff being brought in Minnesota is like more pass happy than the previous regime, which would be very good for him. And
Justin Jefferson has 3,000 receiving yards in 2 seasons.
Well, yeah, and I mean, there's no real way to like split it to make him look like he's not good. He had 1 game where he wasn't double digits last year, and I'm not calling for like a Thielen decline because I don't. That's one of those things we're going to wait till we see it. But what I will say is, if there's any sort of like manageable decline in Thielen, Jefferson's the clear guy to benefit from it, and if this offense becomes more pass heavy, last year they were a 64-36 pass run split, which ranked like 26th in the NFL. And if they just pass more, there's so many more points to be had here. Justin Jefferson is a dog.
I think he's the safest pick in the entire top 12. Because any running back I have higher injury concerns with. So I'm just like I don't think I'd ever call any running back the safest pick in the top 12 after what's happened with Christian McCaffrey the last couple of years. Like he's been the safest pick for the last 2 years, and injuries just happen more. Injuries happen to everybody, but injuries just happen more often to running backs.
I would say the only person I would put over him as safe pick is probably Tyreek Hill, and that's just because he's linked with a better offense, but very close.
Mm-hmm. So I agree with a lot of what you said. I don't have to add too much. I will say like where he has even more upside, and we talked about even before last season, and Thielen did the touchdown thing again when he was healthy, was touchdowns. He has 17 touchdowns in 2 seasons. That's 1 more touchdown than Cooper Kupp had all of last year. So like that's insane from Kupp, number 1. And number 2, like Jefferson could easily have a touchdown explosion season, and that could drastically change his outlook from a top 12-ish player to a Cooper Kupp kind of season. Because the yards, like we've seen 2 seasons, 1,400 and 1,600, like the yards feel like They're absolutely going to be there. And like I said, I really want to call him the best receiver in the NFL. It's so hard when Cooper Kupp just had like the all-time season for a wide receiver from a raw production standpoint to say that. So I won't, but it like just know deep down in my heart, I'm close to going there.
Well, the last thing I'll say is if he came out of the gate and got Ja'Marr Chase's usage, because remember his rookie season's 4 games, he barely saw the field.
Yeah,
he probably still has the rookie receiving record in 1 fewer game.
Mm-hmm.
And the Vikings don't really run it up through the air like a certain Bengals team did against a certain defenseless Baltimore Ravens secondary. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing else to say here. I would say he's probably one of my favorite picks out of the draft and probably one of the better upside picks. So I do agree with you, especially with him being the second or first safest pick in the draft, which means he's going to get injured, knowing our luck.
So I think I should give my 7 now. Which is
your
8? My 8 was Nick Chubb.
Okay, yeah.
Which I got lambasted for. My number 7, Alvin Kamara. And I know you don't have him. This is pretty much a placeholder rank for me. Like, there's just so much we don't know about Kamara. We don't know if he's going to be suspended. If he is, how many games? Like, could it be anywhere from 0 to 6? Yeah, it could easily be anywhere from 0 to 6. I think is probably like the most likely range of outcomes there. We don't know. We know who his coach is, but we don't know his coach. We don't know what kind of offense they're going to have. We don't know who their quarterback is going to be. And we won't know how the coach is going to be until the season starts. So, like, there's just so many unknowns with the Saints. I do think that Michael Thomas coming back should help Kamara a little bit. We saw last year what a bad offense and bad quarterback play did to him. 47 receptions. That's a career low by 34 receptions. He's been over 80 every other year in the NFL. I know he missed a few games, but he played 13 games in 2018 and was still at 81 receptions too. So, like, even if he missed a few games and had a down year, like, you would expect Kamara to be probably in the 60s for receptions, not 47. So that was an obvious nightmare. We were talking about it as it was happening last year. He was also the least efficient he's ever been as a rusher. It was a career low, 4 touchdowns. And it's actually funny. I mentioned this to you too, Dalton. If you're a believer in trends, he's in for a big bounce back year with touchdowns. 8, 14, 5, 16, and 4 are his rushing touchdown totals. So he's in for like a double digit season here if you're a patterns guy.
I would be if there was any consistency right now in New Orleans. Let me first say we do have a little bit of an idea of what his head coach looks like, and it was with the Raiders where he went 4-12, 4-12, 0-4, then fired over 3 seasons. I really don't like the Dennis Allen hire. I think they're trying to keep consistent over the course with the loss of Sean Payton, and they do lose probably like a top 5 left tackle in the NFL, Teron Armstead. It does not look like they can afford to keep him, which is another concern. They are bringing back Jameis, it sounds like, and that would be a positive over any other quarterback play. If I were to have Kamara ranked, I would probably have him at 7 and move the guy I'm going to talk about next above him. So he would, or above the guy I'm about to talk about next. But I am very, like, there's a heavy, out of every player in the top 12, I think he's probably the heaviest bet on outperforming a very ugly situation.
Kamara?
Yeah. And I would be very worried about a pick with him. But obviously, if Dennis Allen, whoever he brings in as an offensive coordinator, can get it going and utilize him effectively, he's the best or the second best receiving back in the NFL. I love the guy, but with the pending legal stuff, I didn't choose to rank him. I would say even with that legal stuff, if he's in your draft and you're at like pick 10, 11, or 12, it's probably worth the shot in the dark to get him at the turn if you're drafting this.
If you're a real sicko doing
if you're
draft right now, sure.
Well, Best Ball has him at RB9 right now. If you're curious, right above Joe Mixon. And
that's way too low on Joe Mixon, in my opinion, as we'll get to, I'm sure. All right, so yeah, I think it's just kind of a placeholder. I think he's probably going to either end up higher than this or lower than this in my final ranks, but he's at 7 for now. So who's your number 7?
My number 7 is Dalvin Cook.
Okay, so I have Dalvin Cook at number 3.
I do not feel confident about Dalvin Cook anymore. He had a great season, as per usual. I don't know how else to explain this other than I've never really thought that Dalvin Cook would keep. He's so good, but he just feels.
Yeah, you said that today, and I don't really understand. Like he was RB15 last year in 12 games, and he was playing through an ankle injury that was clearly hampering him.
Absolutely amazing player.
So I don't understand what you're hanging on.
It feels like every season he's hanging on by a thread. I feel like his injuries continue to pile up over the last 2 years.
I mean, doesn't every running back like have just like the bumps and bruises every week that they're dealing with? That stress you out?
I just really feel like with Dalvin, every week he's on the injury report. And
you know what I think? I think he's just one of those guys that he blew out his ACL at the very beginning of his career, and I just think that he doesn't have the label as injury prone, but I think you're more likely to be scared when a guy like that gets hurt just because he's already had one catastrophic injury in his career.
Yeah. And I don't have any major concerns for him here. It's just he's a little more up there in age, so I docked him a bit. I mean, he's my RB4. So there's just 3 wide receivers in front of him who I think are sure bets. But I mean, that's really all I have to say. The Vikings offensive line is probably losing Garrett Bradbury, which is a really good center. But he's going to be a starter. He's going to ball out. The new offense might dial back his carries, but I think they're going to be way more efficient and have longer drives. So it's not really going to be a net negative to him to lose Zimmer, who really harped on running the ball. Dalvin Cook can catch the ball. I like Madison, but I don't think Madison's really in line to threaten any of his work.
No,
I have him here because I just think everybody above him, except for one guy who's been injured a lot, is a way more sure bet just to perform for your team.
Yeah, I just think Cook is still one of the best 5 running backs in football. I've got him.
He's there. He's 4 for me, so he is best 5 running backs.
I've got him at number 3 overall and RB3 as well. I just think he's just still such a monster. Showed no signs of slowing down last year, even with the ankle injury. Was like still just unbelievable last year when he played, and especially when he played and was like actually healthy. Dalvin Cook, he's RB3 on Fantasy Pros right now, and number 3 overall. So
right now his best ball ADP is RB6.
Actually, RB4. Sorry, Austin Eckler's RB3 in half point.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that was your 7, right?
Yes, sir.
I've already said my 6 is Justin Jefferson. So have you said your 6 yet?
I have not.
Okay, who's your 6?
My 6 is Cheetah, Tyreek Hill.
So Tyreek Hill's not in my top 12.
That is insane. I want to know why you hate the Kansas City Chiefs.
Here's the thing. If the Chiefs don't do anything at receiver this offseason or like do very little, I'll probably move him up. But it's like really like 1 through 5, 1 through 6 is just so close at receiver. It was really hard for me to do these receiver ranks, even to order the guys that are in the top 12. Like, Tyreek finished as wide receiver 6 last year and played all but 1 game. So like it's not like he's not like a slam dunk. He plays every game. He's top 3 every year, no matter what. Like, he had a little bit of a down year last year. I guess we'll see how the Chiefs adjust. He basically turned in like Michael Thomas last year because he had to, because of how defenses were playing them. If they bring in another receiver, like, does that help his role? Probably. Does that hurt his volume and maybe his fantasy production? It's just hard to say. There's a lot. There's a lot of unknown with.
I can't see how you rank AK, but won't rank Tyreek when the unknowns with Kamara are probably more jarring than they are with Hill.
Yeah, but his are like more straightforward. Like, if he is suspended, I move him down. If he's not
jail is pretty not straightforward.
Yeah, you could talk to me if Alvin Kamara is serving jail time about on this one, buddy.
I kicked a dude in the face on video.
Okay, I don't think you. I know you know how these things work. That's all I'm gonna say.
Well, okay, that's fair. But I think that is absurd. So you have Ja'Marr Chase above Tyreek Hill. What would you rank Tyreek Hill, the wide receivers?
I think I have him like at 5 or 6. I think it's like 6, which is where he finished last year, by the way.
I just don't get it. I mean,
but I literally I think I have him I'd have him 13 overall. I'd have him one spot outside of the top 12.
I mean, obviously the Chiefs offense had struggles the first 6 games of the season.
And it's not even an offensive concern for me, but it's just I don't is there another do they bring in a Juju? Do they swing and somehow bring in Calvin Ridley? Do they draft a receiver in the first round? How does that affect Tyreek Hill? Does it make him this uber efficient, high touchdown, low reception, high yardage guy again? Maybe. I just don't know because we've seen that before, but we didn't see that with how the Chiefs were defended last year, and I don't know how another receiver changes that. I just have I'm confused in a lot of different ways with what to do with Tyreek Hill right now.
Well, in my opinion, the outcome is positive either way. First, they bring in another guy and he stops getting bracket coverage on every play, and he can really run.
That's
routes.
Probably never going to stop, to be honest.
Well, even then, he's going to get better coverages and better looks if we bring in a guy who can do anything under the middle, which is infinitely going to help his fantasy production because he didn't get. I think he had 4 or 5 deep ball touchdowns this season.
And also, if Tyreek Hill could catch the ball this last year, he would have had
drops don't correlate year to year. Let's not do this right now.
Let's really hope they don't, because Tyreek Hill had maybe the worst hands in the NFL last year.
And not going to predict this, but even if they bring in another guy, there's a high potential that 34-year-old Travis Kelce takes a step back finally.
I'm pretty sure you're adding years to that
33
glorious man's life. You keep going.
And you're not
Kelce is 32. He'll be 33 mid-October.
Okay. Travis Scott came up when I Googled how old is Travis Kelce, by the way. But you're not going to rank a Chief in the top 12 as a Chief fan. I mean, this.
I'm not doing this as a Chiefs fan. Also, there's been other years where I've been higher on Hill than you.
First CEH, now this. It's
Who was right about that one?
It's not over.
Did you see the tier list where he was listed in the replacement level running back group today? Going around
not
on
yet,
Twitter?
But that seems fitting.
J.K. Dobbins was in that group too, which kind of triggered me.
Wow. Who did the tier list?
I don't know. It was just a random guy that it was Twitter is showing me a lot more suggested dynasty tweets now, and I can't quite figure out why. But I'm getting a lot of weird content in that suggested tweets filter that they're giving me.
The last thing I'll say on this is anytime I can get the number one pass catching option in what could potentially be the best offense every year, I just want it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's out of every wide receiver, he probably has the highest upside play. If Mahomes goes 2019 or 2018 again.
Probably, although Cooper Kupp has an argument for highest upside after what he just did.
Well, he's the one guy that was so difficult for me to put in the top 12. I'm going to be honest with you, despite what he did.
Okay, but so Tyreek Hill, you've got Tyreek Hill 6. We probably let's say about 10 more minutes. I know Johnny's got some cornhole to go play tonight here. My number 5 is Cooper Kupp, who you just said was so difficult for you to rank. Where do you have Kupp, or if you don't have Kupp on this list, you're invalid.
He's number 5.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So Kupp was number 5. He's my wide receiver 1. I really thought hard about Justin Jefferson, as I'm sure you can figure based on me talking a minute ago, but this just feels like about the right spot to zag away from running back for me. I think you have Adams at 4. I have Kupp at 5, so we're about the same. You have Cook lower, and that's our difference there. I mentioned it. He just put up statistically, raw statistics, the most impressive receiver season ever. 2,400 yards. He was literally an automatic 115 yards and 1 touchdown every game. That's just insane. Just insane production. I know he even got the extra game, but I'm just talking about raw production. That's what he had. No one has ever done what he did.
First triple crown since Jerry Rice.
Here's a little trivia question for you. Can you guess the 4 players since 2010 who rank higher in yards per game receiving? And Cooper Kupp was at 114.5 yards per game. 4 guys. So I'll even lower it since 2012. 4 guys since 2012 have had
that's not fair. I'm pretty sure that took out Megatron.
No, it didn't. Megatron's 2012. So
okay, Megatron.
He's number 1 at 122.8 yards per game.
Can I get teams? I want to say Steve Smith almost, but I'm not
going to give you teams because that would make it very easy.
Okay, definitely Megatron.
Yes, I can give you years. It's only 2 other years.
Years is helpful.
2013 and 2015.
That is not helpful. Brandon Marshall.
Okay, 2013 should be a little bit obvious. Think about what happened in 2013 that people are like literally still chasing.
Oh, Demaryius Thomas?
No.
It's not Peyton Manning and his team?
No.
I'm at loss. What is this?
The 2013 Josh Gordon still chasing Josh.
Oh
Josh Gordon
my God, he actually had more yards. I didn't think
more yards per game. This is yards per game. 117.6 yards per game. Now you've got two more, both from the same season, both from 2015. Remember 2015, and then the next year we had a receiver go number 1 overall, and then another one go like top 5 after these seasons by these guys.
I'm blanking.
Johnny, any guesses?
Is this the Brandon Marshall year?
They both played in the NFL last year.
Did they play well?
One guy, yes, and one guy, hard to say because he didn't play too many games.
What year? 2015?
2015.
Antonio Brown?
Antonio Brown. That's one.
So,
114.6.
Wait.
And is another guy that
A-Rob?
same year?
No, Allen Robinson, no. Okay, this is the last 10. Think about who has been the best yardage receiver of the last, basically since he came into the NFL, last 8-9 years.
Juju.
Hopkins.
Julio Jones, 116.9.
You should have said he doesn't score touchdowns. That would have given it to me.
I mean, I kind of hinted at that by saying he's the best yardage receiver of the last 8 or 9 years.
Dang.
All right. So those 4 guys are the only guys that have had better yards per game. So, like, even if you take away the extra game, like, Kupp was still historic in yards per game this
Do we
season.
think he's more talented than any of those guys?
No, but, like, and that's where it's tough. But, like, he was just so good. Like, the counted stats, 145 receptions, 1,947 yards, and 16 touchdowns. I can't go lower than 5. I just can't. And I know it's tough because he was like a 4th-round guy before that, but, maybe Jared Goff was just really holding him back and that playbook back that much.
I really hope so. I did write in this, they're losing Whitworth. Offensive line probably takes a step back, and we know Stafford plays worse with a worse offensive line. His EPA is basically in line with Jared Goff. Do with that what you will. And OBJ and Robert Woods will both be active together all season, which we didn't really see. I feel like those have to be at least in your consideration when you draft him, which is why I have him 2.
Yeah, but have either of them spent more than 200 hours with Matthew Stafford one-on-one?
Well, if I was a receiver on that team, even Skronerick or whatever his name is, I would be going to Bible study and getting breakfast at Denny's with Matt Stafford every game. So maybe the team learned a thing there.
I think if I were the worst white receiver on that team, I would be working on my hands this offseason. And then early almost cost them a Super Bowl the first chance he got in that game. Okay, so Kupp he's your 5, right? So he's both of our 5s. You had Adams at 4. I had Cook at 3. So we both have 4 guys left total. Let's try and zip through.
3 left. Adams is 4. I have 3-2-1.
So let's try and zip through a couple of these that I've got. I guess I have 4-2-1. So we both have 3. I had Joe Mixon at 4.
I have him at 3. I really thought I was gonna out Mixon you here, and I didn't. It's about the same.
Yeah, I mean, I had Cook at 3, and it's a toss-up between those two. I'm still a little bit scared to put Mixon too high, even though 4 is very high. 3 just feels like even scarier.
Yeah, the one thing
even though he definitely he earned it last year with how good he was, and I saw someone make this joke on Twitter, which applies to a guy we're going to talk about in a minute. Remember when Joe Mixon was injury prone? The dude just played 20 games this year. Turns out the little nicks and bruises aren't always a predictive thing every season.
Well, and the one thing that stood out for me in doing my research was he was the number 1 running back with over 100 carries to be touched behind the line of scrimmage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's not like he was the defenders in the box and just the offense. Both of those were improvements from the last couple of years, but the offensive line really was not.
And I think everybody expects them to make at least some manageable improvement here. and that would be huge for him.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's a lot of talk about him not being a receiving back, whatever. He had 5 receptions in the Super Bowl alone. Granted, it was for 1 yard.
I was going to say 5 receptions for 1 yard is a very funny stat line.
In PPR or half PPR, it's still points. That's 3 points.
I had this nugget. He had 42 receptions in the regular season, but worth noting, 18 receptions on 21 targets in 4 playoff games. So they definitely leaned on him more in the passing game. And it's clearly like we're managing our guy, which is totally fine. Like I'm totally fine with them managing Mixon a little bit throughout the season for sure. If you just take the playoffs, like his 17-game pace for receptions would have been like 77. So he's not going to do that, but there is more upside than 42 receptions on any given year, just based on the usage, because like the skill is there. Like I'm never gonna quit joking about Adam Levitan saying that Mixon may have lost the pass catching role. It's like, well, like I don't think that's true, because I think he's still the best pass catcher in that backfield, but it's just they're trying to manage him throughout the season. And I'm trying to remember, I guess he got hurt in that game where that happened, and then he didn't catch many passes when he came back, and that's when the tweet happened.
Yeah. So I guess the big question is, between JT and CMC, who's 1 and 2 for you?
I mean, I've got Christian McCaffrey at 2. I've got Jonathan Taylor 1, and I'm pretty sure you have it flipped. It's pretty. I think we can both agree that the McCaffrey, I don't even call it hate, but just like the McCaffrey rank is still like, I know it's scary to rank him so high after what he's done the last 2 years to you personally, if you've ranked him high, and your teams if you've drafted him. But yeah, like I have, but both these years. Like the guys like the RB 8 or 9 on Fantasy Pros ECR right now. Like I just think that's insane.
I will say on Underdog, he's still the RB 2, so he's still getting love when money's on the line.
Yeah, like I think if anyone's ranking him in the top 5, I still disagree with that. But like that's at least fine. But if you're like barely ranking him inside the top 12, like I just don't know. He played 6 games last year, but if you actually like really look at it, he played 4 complete games last year. He got hurt in the beginning of the second quarter in one, and then before halftime in the other. So in 4 complete games, he was above 20 points 3 times. His one bad game, quote unquote, was 12.6 points. So he's a locked and loaded like top 3 to 5 running back almost every single week. And again, like the Joe Mixon injury prone thing, like we could very easily be saying after this year, remember when Christian McCaffrey was injury prone because he had a thigh injury, he rolled his ankle, he had a hamstring injury. Like it's not like the dude's had like catastrophic injuries. Like even like guys that have had catastrophic injury, like Keenan Allen got the injury prone label when he blew out his knee and then had like the ruptured spleen, and then he has barely missed a game since then. Like I was a guy who was concerned with McCaffrey's workload coming into last season, and this is not me like taking a victory lap based on that, because like I don't think these injuries are real. Like the hamstring is the only one where maybe you could say, well, maybe, but it was like week 4, week 5. I don't think he was like wearing down and then the hamstring just gave. Like the hamstring just gave. It happens. I know he's burned you, but if you look at his 3 years at Stanford and his first 3 NFL seasons, he missed 1 total game. That's not sustainable, but this fluky stretch of injuries is also not sustainable.
Well, and here's really, he is the ultimate fantasy cheat code. I mean, even in super flex leagues, when he was at his prime, he was going 1 overall. I mean, the guy is absolutely,
he's giving you a quarterback production at running back every week.
And here's what I mean by this. If Jonathan Taylor did not score a touchdown, which he did almost every game last year, okay?
Yeah, 4 touchdown game too.
Yes, he did not clear 20 points any game he didn't score a touchdown. In 5 games last year, Christian McCaffrey didn't score a touchdown in 2 of them and scored 21 and 24 points.
Mm-hmm.
And this is it's not a ding on Jonathan Taylor, but Christian McCaffrey doesn't need the end zone to score you 20 points.
No, and you know the reason why,
game, the 50 point.
And you know the reason why he wasn't scoring? Well, John Taylor did have a 50-point game with his 4 touchdown game too.
Yes.
But you know what was a big reason for him not scoring touchdowns in the limited games he played? Because 2 of those games were Cam Newton stealing the touchdowns from him at the goal line, which, trust me, as someone who had Christian McCaffrey and he was like healthy for a very short amount of time, it's like pulling my hair out. Like, you gotta be kidding me with this Cam Newton crap on the 1 or 2 yard line. McCaffrey being used as the decoy to pull the whole defense while Cam Newton walks in the end zone. So it was frustrating, not sustainable. If you look at inside the 5 carries, not last year, obviously, but his last healthy year, he was like 2nd in the league. And like You could make the argument that maybe he shouldn't be, but he's going to get a lot of carries in the money zone. He's going to get passing it. He's just going to get all the work he wants, and he's one of the best players in the NFL. Like I think you've got to be pretty hung up on pretty minor in the grand scheme of NFL injuries to rank him much lower than 2 or 3. And I think it's a coin flip between he and Taylor. I could go either way, but I've got Taylor 1.
Yeah, I mean, he has 10 less targets than Taylor did in 10 less games. And like you said, he didn't even finish the games. And we know, like, catching the football is just a cheat code in fantasy football. It gets you more points in half-point PPR or full PPR. The very last thing I'll say about this, I've seen, like, Cam Akers slipping into people's top 12 and then, like, CMC falling to 5. Let me tell you, like, a subfluctuated shoulder and a hamstring injury are not the same as tearing your Achilles, which has been like a death sentence for running backs. These aren't injuries that you can't recover from. Christian McCaffrey had 50-pound weights at the bottom of the ocean.
I was wondering if we could get through this segment without Christian McCaffrey's underwater.
Come on, guys. He's my number one. He'll be my number one all offseason. Out of everything in these rankings, I will not change that. You cannot make me change that unless he gets hurt or assaults someone outside of an elevator in Las Vegas. Those are the two options.
So I've got Jonathan Taylor at 1. I know he was the RB1 last year, but I know it wasn't like a banner RB1 season. If you're just looking at recent history, I think it was the fewest points for an RB1 overall since Devontae Freeman in 2015. But if you look at it a little deeper, he was basically getting 50% of the snaps for like the first 5 weeks of the season. And I remember how frustrated we all were with, number one, his usage or lack thereof, and number 2, his touchdowns. He actually didn't have touchdowns earlier in the season. He way overcorrected later in the season, so his touchdown total was still really awesome. But like, there was definitely room for improvement earlier in the season when Frank Reich was Frank Reiching us right in the balls earlier in the season with how he was using Jonathan Taylor. He was in double digits every time he got at least 60% of the snaps. 40 receptions last year after 36 the year before. Like, I think he's got room to grow there. Because remember when he was coming out of college, the thing was like, well, this guy doesn't catch any passes. He's not going to catch passes. Well, it's like, well, he actually can. He just wasn't thrown to at Wisconsin. Like,
to be fair, he has had 2 quarterbacks who are very prone to throw.
I know. But like, I'm not saying he's going to have like 60 receptions, but like he could have 45, 50 receptions.
Yeah.
And pretty easily. I think he's got that kind of talent as a pass catcher. And he's obviously very young, still an ascending talent. We don't exactly know that situation, but that doesn't scare me. Like, the situation was not good for large chunks of last season. I got a little bit scared off of Taylor in the preseason because I was concerned with the Carson Wentz injury. I regret lowering him in the ranks, and I've got him at 1 just because I feel a little bit safer than with McCaffrey.
It sounds like Wentz is gone from Indianapolis. Any quarterback scare you off of him?
No.
Sam Darnold.
No. I mean, we're all in Christian McCaffrey 1, rightfully so, with both those guys as his quarterback.
Cam Newton.
That's just not going to happen. Here's one. Baker Mayfield.
I want to drop him.
Anything to add on Taylor before I guess? Okay, we should at least mention a couple guys that we left off. But anything on Taylor first before we get to that and then get out of here?
No, supreme talent, should be second drafted overall. I agree with everything you said. Offensive line returns in full. They have starting left tackle Eric Fisher all season next year, and they should have Quentin Nelson all season. Mm-hmm. What are the best lines? They'll be fine. Frank Reich's a great coach.
So outside of Tyreek Hill and Najee Harris, we've already touched on both of those. I think some key omissions on my list that people would probably raise their eyebrows at. Austin Eckler would be the first one. He's like a top 5 running back in a lot of places you look. He had 25 attempts inside the 10-yard line rushing last year and 10 touchdowns. That's on par, basically, like almost exactly, with James Conner, who we all agree is falling back down to earth. Now, it's not like Eckler's not going to fall back down to earth like James Conner probably will this year. But the overall point is, like, there's just no shot Eckler is doing what he did touchdown-wise last season. He had 8 rushing touchdowns in his entire career before last year, and he had 12 last season. In 2019, that was his big breakout year, but that was largely because he had 900 receiving yards and a lot of touchdowns there. He had 17 carries inside the 10, and 3 of those were touchdowns. So 3 out of 17 touchdowns compared to 10 out of 25. Like, I just think there's going to be another guy there who's more of a factor. They never found that guy this last season. And then Antonio Gibson is another guy that I think you can make an argument for inside the top 12. I just can't quite get there with him. He's a very, very good player, but a lot of unknown with the Washington football team at the moment too. Or the Commanders. We have a name now. The Commanders.
That's wild. Underdog has him as the 34th player off the board.
I think that's crazy.
Maybe. I will say the only guy that I would say is
he's RB12 on Fantasy Pros. That's a huge difference.
He's RB13 on Underdog. He's just, I think Underdog leans a little more heavily on wide receiver heavy builds, which probably changes that. But Ekeler, okay, so anybody who listened to the podcast last year, I hammered the Ekeler train. Mm-hmm. And I think I said he was like a top 8 running back. I did not. There was not a top 2 running back outcome that I predicted. And if you're doing like a bell curve, this is like we're way over here on the bell curve. If this is the curve, he's all the way over here, and you're drafting a player that's playing like at maximum efficiency. Not like
if you're listening on the podcast, Dalton just kind of moved his hands around.
I drew a bell curve.
That's really all he did. You're not missing much.
Unlike players like Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, and Dalvin Cook, this is like him playing out of his mind and otherworldly in an offense that could not find anybody to play behind him despite their best efforts. And it's an offense that had a really, really high red zone conversion rate that doesn't seem sustainable. Even with the loss of Mike Williams and Jared Cook, I just don't see a world where Ekeler repeats the touchdown upside. And it was very clear that they wanted one of these running backs behind Ekeler to do something all season because they didn't want him getting injured because he's the smallest starting running back in the NFL at 199 pounds. And you're just drafting. This is the one player that I see going really high right now that I'm absolutely against because you're drafting him at like his very highest ceiling and there's no come down from it. Like
it's kind of like I think before our first season of the pod, I didn't like Chris Godwin at wide receiver like 6 or 5 and on rankings, not because I didn't think Godwin would be like a top 10 receiver, but because you were drafting him at literally his absolute peak. The best you could hope for was to break even, which, to be fair, if you're drafting someone at 3, that's almost the best you can hope for anyway. But like, I think it's like for other guys you draft that high, you want it to be like a
once in a lifetime season.
Like a 20% shot. Like as long as they don't get hurt and have a good year, they're probably going to be up here. With Ekeler, it's like he's never been up there before in 5 years. He was there in his 5th year. I just don't. I think it's a pretty low chance that you see that again this year.
Well, and do not take this as a 1-to-1 comparison because Ekeler is a better football player. But there was a year where Doug Martin was going 5th overall, and Doug Martin the prior season had absolutely hammered his like highest of outcomes, and then he fell. The floor fell out from him, and that is not completely without Austin Ekeler's like realm of outcomes. First of all, because he's so small, and second of all, because the Chargers could just get a bigger back and put him in the goal line, and then you lose. I think it was 20 touchdowns or something like that.
You know who the Chargers could bring in? Melvin Gordon. They 100% could. It would make a lot of sense too. I don't think he'd be that expensive.
Yeah, if Ekeler was still going in the 14th or 15th pick, I think that's about value for him. I do not think this is valuable because out of everybody in the first round, he's the one player who can't have like a generation-defining season, in my opinion. Almost everybody else can. Derrick Henry almost did. Cooper Kupp did. CMC has. Taylor can. Jefferson can. Chase can. Kamara can. I mean, it's just not in Ekeler's skill set. No offense to him.
I agree. And I just want to mention Swift again before we get out of here. And we get in trouble over analyzing situations sometimes, like, with the Rams and Todd Gurley before he busted out. And there's other examples, obviously, where like the biggest one is Keenan Allen with Herbert before Herbert had played a game when Keenan Allen was like a 4th round pick and he should have been a 2nd round pick.
Well, that was Tyrod first, if we're just being
but before Herbert had played a game, and we were scared of Tyrod, and then Herbert, like, you remember, people were not high on Herbert as a prospect. Like, he went high in the draft, but people did not like him that much as a quarterback prospect. So, like, I'm not saying that Swift is going to have that happen. Like, but if the situation did turn good, or like okay, that dude's a top 12 player in my opinion. But I can't get there. And these rankings
with Gibson, to be fair.
Yeah, I think Swift is better than Gibson too.
Me too.
All right. And anything else before we get out of here, Dalton? Last thoughts?
I just want to say wide back Deebo Samuel. I saw him a few times at the 12 turn. Respect the player. No idea what's going on in San Francisco.
Agreed.
Quarterback wise, do not want to touch that with a 5-foot pole. So
I would take him like an early second, but it was a little rich. He could be a potential riser depending on what happens with some others that I talked about in this top 12. But I think that is going to do it for us today on episode 65 of the Half Point Per Podcast. Give us a follow on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at Half Point Per Pod. Subscribe to the YouTube. The link to all of that will be in the show notes, as will the list of players that we talked about today. And I know for a fact we will not have a podcast next week. Possibly 2 weeks from now, we'll be back. We'll see. We'll let you guys know a little bit more on the schedule, but we will talk to you sometime in the near future.